Hello and welcome to Journeys and Journals. This is a TV show, but I feel like it's a real old-fashioned one. I brought along my radio mic and I get to talk history. History now, we're going to turn the clock back, way back. I want you to meet my friend Leon Hunsaker. Welcome to Journeys and welcome back.
Thank you very much, Bernie.
Now, you started out in Southern Oregon, Northern California a few years back.
Oh, yes. I lived in California some 25 years and finally wound up, I was with Pacific Gas and Electric Company as a meteorologist. Then I had a chance to go on television and I took that.
Yeah, because I'd see you in San Francisco Bay Area on television. What channel was that?
Channel 5.
Channel 5, and here's the weather with Leon Hunsaker. I can almost, my ears remember these days.
Yeah, that was some time ago. I didn't have quite as many wrinkles then as I do now, so it was a while ago.
Well, do you want to tell us how many winters and summers you've been around?
What is it they say? Older than dirt? I come pretty close to that. I just turned 83.
You know, older than mud is what we're going to talk about, because you're here talking about water.
Yes.
You are the expert, but how did you get into the business of water? Rainfall, let's call it.
Yeah. And then, of course, that translates into river flow and stream flow. And when I was with Pacific Gas and Electric Company, they became involved in a lawsuit, a cloud seeding lawsuit.
Who could sue them?
Well, December 1955, Christmas Eve, Yuba City flooded, and all the orchards and everything else around the area flooded. And PG&E was sued because they claimed that the cloud seeding increased the precipitation and therefore the runoff, and that contributed to the flood.
Well, now, the only way you could prove it was, say, before cloud seeding, there were still floods.
Well, that's right, and that's how I got into the historical end of it. Yeah, that's how I got into the historical end of it, because the attorney that was heading up the case, he asked me, he says, were there any other floods of greater magnitude than December 1955 in this area before seeding?
Now, this is
so I got into that, see, and that took me way back into the 1860s and 50s and
history books, reading old documents in old diaries.
A lot of fun.
Now, is this the guy we're talking about? Those were the days.
I don't know. I think that's some youthful imposter there.
That's Leon Hunsaker, folks. We were all young once, but now this is the era. Here you are in front of San Francisco Bay, I think.
Well, there's a picture of it, yeah. It was when I was, before I went with PG&E, I worked for the Air Force for a couple of years at Hamilton Field. And well, I guess I might as well say it via the picture. They're presenting me with the check for Outstanding Performance Award. And of course, there was money associated with it. And you take that, you don't.
It's a kind of trophy that says, thanks for your good work. And Leon, that's what this whole show is about, because you have your contribution to history. Look at the books this guy has written. Why put it all in print? What's the reason you did this?
Well, I have 17 grandchildren. And so I'd say probability says I'll have a kind of a large posterity. Right. And I'm going to meet very few of them, you know.
The great-great-grandchildren aren't even born.
Who is that old man they talk about, you know? So I tried to maybe defend myself by writing a book and telling my side of the story. But in this first book, Getting Started, what I tried to do was to emphasize how important it is to do the best you can in whatever you're doing.
And you happen to be the weatherman on Channel 5 TV, so you knew that.
In San Francisco, yeah.
And And we appreciated you in South Bay, where I lived, in Los Altos and Sunnyvale, because it was broadcast throughout the Bay Area. When I heard that you'd moved to Northern California, I said, I've got to meet this man. And fortunately, Better Life TV brought me in touch with your wife and the quilting.
Yes,
Tell me a little bit
yes.
about her.
Well, she's a great lady. She'd have to be to put up with me. You know, it's, we've been married, it'll soon be 59 years. And it's been a wonderful time. I won't say that everything was peaches and cream, but you know how
it had
how
a few
is.
storms.
Yeah, and a few squall lines came along, you know, that sort of thing. But we've had a great life together.
And her name is?
Pardon?
Her name is?
Is Margaret. And she is a quilter supreme, and I need to tell one quick one. She accuses me of never being interested in her quilting until she started to bring home blue ribbons from the fair. And then she said I got interested. Well, it's partially true, I admit.
I got to visit their home, and there was quilting going on in the home. You live in rural America. How did you choose to live in Southern Oregon?
Well, we came through here on a vacation in 1968 to Canada. And boy, you know, this is a place that would be nice to settle down in someday. So anyway, we bought property a few years later over in Hugo, and that's where we built our place. And then when things took a wrong turn in San Francisco, then we had a place to go up here.
Oh, sure. It's great to come home, you know.
Well, I tell you, in San Francisco, the reason this all happened, we kind of had a rocky spot in my career down there with Channel 5. I was with them twice. And the reason for the rocky spot was that in 1971, we had the highest rated news program in the United States of the major markets. It was really, we had Barry Tompkins, John Weston. I mean, it was a good group. We're on majors. But when I came back the second time, and they invited me back, they said I could have control of the weather show. But then after I got there, you could see they were starting to change their mind. And I just didn't like the direction it was going, and that led to friction. And when friction comes, the best thing to do is jump ship.
When the heat gets, the temperature gets up, it doesn't get comfortable, does it?
No, it doesn't. It's not a good place to be.
And depending on our age, it's a logical time to move on, isn't it?
It was, and we had already bought the property here in Southern Oregon, started to build our home with the help of my brother. We built a package home from CAP, and so we've developed the property that we live on. Not that it couldn't use a little more developing, and especially folks that come in with weed eaters and knock down the weeds, you know, things like that.
Yeah,
but,
and blackberry cutter down.
Yeah, but it's heaven on earth to us.
Well, and we bought ours at $25 a month. I mean, we didn't have money to buy a place.
Yeah.
We just did we were just kids, and we knew we wanted to come back home. So we bought a little spot that said one day we're going to come back and put our sign up on Oregon turf.
Yes.
The state of Jefferson, there's nothing like it. Any place in the nations I've been
It is the hidden spot, and of course it's being discovered now, as indicated by the number of people that are moving in.
Yeah, we're famous for those rivers.
Yes.
And that is California. Northern California has got that gorgeous, and that's where this boat story comes from, because the Knutsons built boats, and they were rentals. You could go to the park and rent a boat for the day. And down on in California, they had a boat, whole mooring. They'd bought a dozen or so boats. Carl Knutson told me this story. He's over in the coast. He lives just north of Brookings. And he said that they had bought in a boat launching place. They'd bought a number of these canoes and boats. And then came the flood. The flood of 55 or 64, Carl, I'm not sure which one it was, broke all these loose.
Yeah.
And of course, you know that that's the last you're going to see when there's floodwaters wiping out this marina. One of these silly boats had a different idea. Without anybody aboard it, it shows up in the Columbia River. How does that happen?
I don't know. You know, you've heard about people writing a note, putting it in a bottle, and tossing it in the ocean. Sometimes they wind up in incredible places you wouldn't believe that they'd ever
Hundreds of miles north of California, where this was moored, and there it went. I just love the story, but the bottle story is true. Now, you've seen things, and you're talking currents, right?
Yeah.
Water currents, but this is not about water currents.
No, that's the jet stream.
Because there's similar currents above us.
Well, you see, oceanographers don't like to hear me say this.
But go ahead, we're listening.
You see, I claim that the air currents is what drives the water currents. See?
Okay.
And you know, they might say, well, yeah, maybe it'll affect it some and all that, but not these gyrations. That's a different.
Leon Hunsaker wrote this book a few years back to prove that we should have expected the 1964 flood?
Yeah, 1955 and 1964, same general pattern. Across the Pacific, then up over a ridge of high pressure in Alaska, and then all the cold air and the snow and everything coming from the north. And then the key to it is what this storm does. If it drives straight over and bangs into this high pressure area, you get more cold weather and snow. If it gets to this point and turns southeast, then it'll knock these storms underneath, and you'll get what some people call the Pineapple Express.
Okay, and this is full of rain, not snow.
Rain to the summit when this warm storm breaks through, see? And that's what happened in 1861-62. 3 of those type storms in, 52 days.
And that's what you've been able to research and document and verify?
Yeah.
Leon, this is phenomenal, because putting this all together in book 1 and now book 2 with help. This one you've had help with.
Well, yes, and I want to say this about this book. I don't recommend it to people unless they're interested in floods. One other recommendation: if you have a friend that lives, or a relative that lives in the Sacramento Valley, I think that's a good present.
Well,
because it really rings the alarm bell.
It's a lot of documented words. What about Sacramento? This is right downtown.
It's K Street, yep.
And Sacramento,
1862.
This is an actual
photo. We got permission from the people who control that photo to put it in our book.
It's called Lake Sacramento. You can just jolly well see. Do you have any stories from diaries about what happened in Sacramento or the Valley?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of things happen down there that are just wild. They tell about cattle, you know, and deer, wildlife, all of them, trying to find the high ground. And then, of course, crowded around there so much that there wasn't feed for them. And so a lot of them just simply starved to death, aside from something like 200,000 head of cattle died in the floods of 1861-62.
And any estimate of loss of people?
The only one that I saw was an estimate of the Chinese that were lost in the December flood. They said there was roughly 500 of them.
Oh my goodness.
And see, now the population of California during this time period was only about 500,000. And most of the population was in the northern part of the state, about 100,000 in San Francisco. And those that have settled, where did they settle? Along the rivers.
Of course.
And that's where the real damage came, of course. Well, one, they estimate, the two Taylor brothers that researched this, they estimate that 1 in 8 houses was actually destroyed. 1 out of 8 in California.
In the whole state of California by this one flood.
This series of floods, 3 of them.
Right, 3 weeks.
Yeah, 552 days. And there was, they said that roughly 7 out of 8 houses sustained damage.
Oh boy, though you wished you built on top of the mountain then.
They said a third of the economy, the base of the economy, was destroyed in this flood.
And as the rain came onto the snow, as I understand it, it was just like, because there was snowpack, but there was frozen ground.
Yep, this was early January 10th of 1862.
Okay, if you folks put a sponge on top of frozen ground, and it'll absorb until
it finally can't anymore, and then it collapses. But you see, the rain from the storm is still coming. So then that whole wall of water takes off, and that's why Folsom Dam, they have a problem there. It is the one they worry about that could produce enough water to cause the overflow of the dam.
In Sacramento, here it comes.
Yeah.
We've seen water flowing in our area here in Southern Oregon, Northern California. We've seen Yuba City. We've seen in my lifetime floods.
Yep. December 1955 flooded Yuba City on Christmas Eve.
On Christmas Eve.
Yep.
Oh, I remember Christmas presents.
Yeah.
Just afloat here in Rogue Valley. You have, let's talk a little more about your family. What do they think of you now that your work is considered to be?
Well, not many people know about it yet, but I...
Not the grandkids?
Well, I think the grandkids, oh, Grandpa, you're going to tell me about your books again? I mean, it's...
How many grandkids do you have?
I have 17 grandchildren, 4 great-grandchildren.
And 4 great-grandchildren. Yeah. Now, do they get to come and visit in God's country and just...
Yeah, and we occasionally go visit them, but as old as we're getting, it's... we wait for them to come to us.
Ah, but don't they love to come to the Rogue Valley?
It is a great place. It is a great place to have a vacation. It really is. You've got the ocean, you've got the caves, you've got the Crater Lake, all these things, and of course rafting down the Rogue. And it is a choice location, no question about it.
Right, and the Umpqua has those features, and in California, those rivers are just...
What, the Klamath River in California?
Oh, the Klamath, and that's where this big flood with the Klamath River was where these were moored, and I really can't remember if it was the town of Klamath in California.
Yes.
Or just where these were moored.
Over on the coast, they're probably in the town of Klamath.
Right.
Yeah.
These boats were all lined up in some nice mooring, and off they went. The Knutsons are the ones that told me this story, and oh, how I remember Earl and Leah Knutson here in Grants Pass, and they had so much history. Boys would take their little boat, and that was the way you dated. You didn't go to the movies, you went out boating. That was a big thing here in the Rogue Valley, and I bet you just about any place there was water. Well, how our lakes and rivers are so famous for boating and for fishing. It's just incredible, but the fish are definitely affected by these floods, aren't they?
Oh, I would say so. Golly, I was thinking when you said that, down in the San Francisco Bay, there was so much water from the 61-62 flood flowed down through the Carquinez Straits and out into San Pablo Bay. That's the north part of the Bay Area. They were catching freshwater fish in that.
In the salt water?
Yeah, in the salt water. Well, there was about a layer they estimated to be somewhere around 8 to 20 foot thick of fresh water coming out of there. That's why they didn't have any tides for about a week.
Now, where do you get that information? I mean, this is a long time ago.
I know, but there's stuff that I got that from the two Taylor brothers that researched 1862, especially in Southern California, but they did some work in Northern California, and they tell about the freshwater and the fish and the depth of the fresh water flowing out. It's in their publication.
Incredible. We lived in the Bay Area, and I just am trying to imagine what would have happened. I mean, it would have reversed the tide.
Oh yeah, they didn't come for a week. They didn't have a tide.
Because there's a wall of water coming from...
Outflow from the valley, from these floods.
So it had come off the Sierras.
Yep.
Like a wall of water?
Well, of course, that was just that one special case. But these storms, it just kept coming. See, you got 3 major floods in 52 days. Okay? And so you had a lot of water flowing out there, and I think the period of time where it was stopped the tide for a week was in January of 1862, when that big one with the wall of water, as you say, come off and just flooded out across. Can you imagine raising the depth of the Sacramento Valley water 2 to 3 feet over hundreds of square miles?
No, I can't even.
And they already had a lake, you see, that extended from just south of Red Bluff to all the way down into the San Joaquin Valley.
Now we can look this up probably on the web, in a library. We can see that the whole Sacramento, I mean the whole valley there is affected.
California has some serious problems. They just really do. The levees are deteriorating. And then there's the specter of the threat of one of these big floods or an earthquake of rather large proportions in the East Bay Hills, causing those levees to collapse in the Delta region.
There's nobody to put their finger in the dike anymore. We don't have any.
No.
A Holland Dutch boy who would, it's incredible. And this has all been documented to the maximum by your research,
and the other people that I've mentioned, the Taylor brothers have done a lot of work on this, and they're still down there. Robert lives in Livermore, and Leonard is a doctor down in Southern California near San Bernardino. I'm trying to think of the name of the place. I'm going to say Uplands. That isn't right.
When people ask me why I do this show, you now know. I get to meet people like Leon who have firsthand knowledge. That's the history that I'm seeking, things that aren't necessarily in the book, but why did you go to the trouble? This is hours and hours of work.
Well, I told you why I went on this one. This one, I worked on a lawsuit 45 years ago, and it collected a lot of material. And I've carried it around with me everywhere I went.
Apple boxes.
And the fellow that helped me acquire that information, in fact, we pay tribute to him here in the book, a fellow by the name of Bradshaw. And I think his picture's in there somewhere, right about in the beginning. Go another one.
Okay, we'll get Mr.
Yeah,
Bradshaw.
Get it there. Yeah, go one more. Go one more.
He was the...
Yeah. He was a claims adjuster, and he kind of liked me. We had worked together for a couple of years on this lawsuit, off and on, and he saw my interest, and so when the trial was over, he got permission from the powers that be to give me the records.
And that...
So that got it started, and I kept looking at that, because I promised him someday I'd dig into this. But you know how someday is next to never in the dictionary, you know. And but finally my conscience got the best of me, and of course then when Claude Curran came along and said he'd help me with it, why then we got back into it, and it took us another 2 or 3 years to put it all together.
Well, one of the funny things is when you moved north came these boxes
These boxes.
of things that you always meant to
Yeah,
put together.
yeah.
And you did it.
Yeah, well,
See, that'll encourage people here who have family albums that they always meant to get the pictures in, or family stories. This is just an incredible way to put things down in print. And you said they're not for everybody.
no.
These are for
Unless
serious.
you're interested in floods, I don't recommend it. But I do. It's Oregon Book carries them, and so does Copy Quick here in town. But if you've got a friend in the Sacramento Valley and you want to send them a meaningful gift, I recommend it.
I surely do too. It's a lot of heavy reading in here, but those pictures are worth $1 million.
Yeah.
And because it all relates to us, and it was not caused by cloud seeding. That was the
That's what started it all.
The court said,
Yeah. When we ran into the 1861 series, and that's where we found it, the thing about that particular series, we knew then that you can't blame what goes on now. In 55 would not been larger than that particular one in 61, 62. It was just bigger all
year
by itself.
1861,
you know.
62.
1861, yeah.
So 100 year, 200 year, I don't know.
Yeah.
But we ain't seen nothing yet.
Well, I don't expect to see an awful lot more, you know, about soon we'll be headed for grass, you know, but what is it they say, below grass?
Yeah, you and me both. Thank you so much, Leon, for being my guest.
Thank you.
This
You're
is
welcome.
awesome material. And get acquainted with your neighbor next door, the guy down the street, when, you know, they've got stories just like my husband met Leon in the post office, I think, and first time. And
That's right, yeah.
I'm just a lucky person. This is Bernie Martin Beck saying thanks so much for tuning in.